38 years old and still single. Nadia, what exactly are you waiting for? Even small girls are married now.
What would you do if the very people you bled for, the ones you fed, the ones you carried, stood in a room full of people and laughed at your pain? That is exactly what happened to me. My name is Nadia George. I am 38 years old. I am not married, and apparently in my family, that is the greatest sin a woman can commit. It was a Saturday, my niece Chisom's engagement party. The compound was full of color, Ankara prints, gold jewelry, the smell of jollof rice and palm wine floating through the warm Lagos afternoon air. Children were running between the plastic chairs. The hired MC was cracking jokes into a microphone that kept squealing with feedback. Everyone was laughing, dancing, celebrating. Everyone except me. I was standing by the side of the canopy, holding a plastic cup of Fanta I hadn't even tasted, watching my family the way you watch a fire, from a safe distance, knowing it can burn you. Then my Auntie Rosalind opened her mouth. She was sitting at a high table with the other older women, the ones who had appointed themselves judges of every woman's life. She didn't lower her voice. She never did. Auntie Rosalind believed that if God gave you an opinion, you are meant to share it loudly. Nadia is here again, oh, she said, fanning herself with a paper plate. 38 years old, still no husband, still no child. What is she waiting for? The second coming of Christ? The women around her laughed. Not small laughs, big, belly-deep, open-mouthed laughs, the kind that carry across a compound. I felt it in my chest, that sharp, familiar sting, like a needle going in slowly. I had felt it so many times that I should have been used to it. But pain like that, you never get used to it. You just learn to keep your face still while your insides are bleeding. I swallowed. I looked away. I told myself what I always told myself. Let it go, Nadia. They don't know. They don't understand. But then my younger brother Emeka walked past me, and I heard him say to his wife, just loud enough, "She's too proud. That's why nobody has married her. Too proud and too difficult." His wife giggled and they moved on. Too proud. I, Nadia George, who had paid this same Emeka's university fees for 4 years straight. I, who had gone without new clothes for 2 seasons so that my brother could have a future. Too proud. I set down my cup of Fanta on the nearest table. I straightened my dress. I lifted my chin and I smiled. The smile I had perfected over years. The one that looked like peace but was really just survival. Nobody in that compound knew my story. Not really. They saw a woman who was unmarried at 38, and in their eyes, that was all they needed to know. They had already written my life's verdict without hearing a single word of my testimony. But that evening, God help me, everything was about to change. Let me tell you something about sacrifice. Real sacrifice, the kind that costs you, does not come with applause. Nobody claps for you. Nobody sees. You just give and give and give until one day you look in the mirror and you can barely recognize the woman staring back at you. I was 24 when my father died. He went suddenly, a stroke, in the middle of the night. One day he was there, the next he was gone, and our whole family collapsed like a building with no foundation. My mother, who had never worked a formal job in her life, did not know where to begin. The family provisions shop in Alaba Market was drowning in debt. My brother Emeka had just gotten admission to study engineering. My younger sister Bisi was in secondary school. And I had just started a small administrative job at a logistics company in Lagos Island, earning 45,000 naira a month. 45,000 naira. For a family of 4 in Lagos. I did not think twice. I just started carrying it. I restructured the shop's debt by negotiating with suppliers myself, taking buses across Lagos, sitting on wooden benches in people's offices, begging with a straight face and a proud heart. I took on extra freelance work at night, typing documents for small businesses, proofreading contracts, anything that paid. I bought Emeka's first set of university textbooks with money I had been saving to buy a winter coat for a trip I would never take. I paid BC's school fees one time at a time, sometimes running to meet the deadline by just one day. My mother's health started failing 2 years later. High blood pressure, and then a kidney scare that landed her in a private hospital for 3 weeks. I remember standing at the hospital billing desk with my ATM card, watching the numbers on the receipt, calculating in my head whether I could still pay my rent that month. I could not. I moved into a smaller room in a shared apartment in Mushin. I told no one. This is the life they did not see. The versions of me that existed in the early morning darkness, counting money on a kitchen table. The version that cried in the bathroom at work because the stress was too much, but there was no space to break down at home. The version that smiled at family gatherings and said, "I'm fine, I'm managing," when the truth was that I was one emergency away from drowning. And then there was Kolade. Kolade Adewale entered my life when I was 29. He was successful, focused, charming in the way that men who know their worth are charming. He came to one of our family gatherings with a mutual friend, and from the beginning he saw me, not the sacrificing daughter, not the responsible sister, but me, Nadia, the woman underneath all the duty. We dated for 2 years. He proposed on a Tuesday evening at a small restaurant in Victoria Island. No big production, just a simple ring and honest words. He said, "I want to build something real with you, Nadia. You are the most steady person I have ever known." I said yes. I was 31. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future that belonged to me. But joy in my family always came with a hidden tax. I want you to think about the worst kind of betrayal. Not from an enemy, enemies you expect. I'm talking about the betrayal that comes from someone who sat at the same table as you, who ate the food you bought, who you loved without condition. That is the kind that doesn't just break your heart, it breaks your belief in people. Her name was Adeze, my cousin, my mother's sister's daughter. She was 25 at the time, young, beautiful, with a laugh that filled every room she entered. We had grown up together. When her mother was sick, it was my house she ran to. When she needed money for her shop startup, I gave it without asking for it back. I loved Adeze the way you love a sister you chose. The engagement to Kolade was still new. We had only announced it to close family. The introduction ceremony was being planned. I was in that particular kind of happiness that feels almost dangerous because you know how rare it is. Then one night, I went to surprise Kolade at his apartment. He didn't know I was coming. I had been working late and just wanted to see his face, hear his voice, sit in his presence for a few minutes before going home. I knocked, no answer. I knocked again. The door was not fully latched, it swung open under my knuckles. And there she was. Adeze, in his apartment. Her shoes by the door, her bag on his couch, and the way they both froze when they saw me, that particular stillness of people who have been caught, told me everything I needed to know before a single word was spoken. The room smelled like food she had cooked. There was a pot on his stove. She had been cooking for my fiancé in his home. Kolade started talking immediately, words, explanations, the whole desperate machinery of a man scrambling for cover. But I wasn't listening. I was looking at Adeze, my cousin, my sister, the woman I had helped build. And she couldn't even hold my gaze. I walked out. I did not scream. I did not throw anything. I just walked out into the night air of Lagos, stood by the roadside, and let the weight of what I had just seen settle into my body like cold water. I ended the engagement that week, quietly, no drama, no announcement. When family asked what happened, I said only that it didn't work out. I protected Adeze's name, I protected Kolade's reputation. I swallowed the whole story and buried it deep inside myself. And then I went back to work, back to carrying the family, Back to being Nadia, steady, responsible, alone. What I didn't know was that Adeze and Kolade did not last. 6 months after I walked out of that apartment, he left her too. And she moved on like nothing had happened. She came to family gatherings, she called me my sister, and I let her, because what else do you do when the person who hurt you is someone you once loved? But secrets in Nigerian families are like smoke. Sooner or later, someone smells something. If this story is touching something inside you, subscribe to this channel, because what happens next will shake this entire family to its roots. The party was in its 3rd hour. The generator was humming. The music had shifted from high life to Afrobeats, and the younger cousins were on the makeshift dance floor, showing off steps that made the older aunties shake their heads and clap at the same time. I had found a quiet corner. I was counting the minutes until I could leave without it becoming a story, because in this family, even leaving a party too early was something they would discuss for weeks. That was when Uncle Bartholomew arrived. Uncle Bartholomew was not a blood relative. He was one of those family friends who had been around so long that the title just stuck. He had known my father since their university days in Ibadan. He was in his late 60s now, a retired civil servant with a quiet dignity about him, the kind of man who chose his words the way a carpenter chooses wood, carefully, for purpose. He walked into the compound and the older people rose to greet him with the kind of warmth reserved for people who have earned respect over decades. He shook hands, hugged my mother, blessed Chisom and her fiancé. Then he sat down at the high table. I watched him from my corner. There was something deliberate about the way he moved, like a man who had come to say something. Auntie Roseline, who had apparently not finished her performance for the evening, leaned toward him as he settled into his chair. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught enough. She was continuing her earlier commentary about me, gesturing in my direction, probably listing my failures as a woman for the 100th time that day. Uncle Bartholomew looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked across the compound at me, and then he stood up. He asked the MC for the microphone. Just like that, the music stopped. People turned. You know how it is at Nigerian parties. When an elder asks for the microphone, the whole atmosphere shifts. Even the children stopped running. I want to say something, he began, his voice carrying the natural authority of a man who had never needed to shout to be heard. I have been sitting here listening, and there is something that has been on my chest for a long time. Tonight, I feel the time has come to put it down. The compound was completely quiet now. He cleared his throat. Some of you have been making jokes this evening about Nadia, about why she is not married, about what kind of woman she must be. He paused. I knew her father. Emmanuel George was my closest friend for 30 years, and if he were alive today, he would be standing where I am standing. I felt something loosen in my chest, like a knot coming undone. 7 years ago, Uncle Bartholomew continued, Nadia was engaged to be married. Most of you in this compound know Kolade Adewale, a fine young man, everyone said. A good match, everyone said. He looked slowly around the gathering. What you do not know is why that engagement ended. The silence became a different kind of silence, the kind with weight. It ended because the man she was going to marry was involved, secretly, shamefully, with someone in this very family. He let those words sit in the air. Someone Nadia trusted with her whole heart. I watched faces change across the compound. I watched eyes move. I watched people do the mathematics. And then I watched Adeze, who had been standing by the drinks table with a cup in her hand, go completely, absolutely still. The first person to speak was my mother. She said, Bartholomew, and then her voice broke, just like that. One word and a break, like a bridge that could not hold the weight of what was crossing it. Because she knew. I realized in that moment she had known. Not everything, not the details, but somewhere in that mother's knowing that women carry in their bodies, she had suspected, and she had said nothing, and she had let the years pass, and she had sat in this same compound and watched her sisters mock her daughter and said nothing. The guilt on her face was its own confession. Adeaze put down her cup. Uncle Bartholomew, I don't think this is the place. Sit down, my daughter. His voice was not unkind, but it was final. The place for truth is wherever the lies have been living, and the lies have been living here, in this compound, for 7 years. Everyone was looking at Adeaze now. She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw something I had never expected to see. Not defiance, not more lies, but exhaustion. The exhaustion of someone who has been carrying a secret that was never really hers to carry alone. Because shame, when you deserve it, is its own kind of prison. Nadia, she said, her voice dropping, I'm sorry. 2 words, after 7 years, at a party, in front of everyone. I don't know what I expected to feel. Rage, maybe. Triumph. Some explosion of everything I had pressed down for years. But what I felt was something quieter and sadder than that. I felt tired. Deeply, bone-level tired. I stood up from my corner, and I walked to the middle of that compound. I had not planned to speak, but my mouth opened, and the words came, not in anger, but in that very specific tone of a woman who has decided, once and for all, to be done with silence. I want to say something, I said, since we are speaking truth tonight. The MC held the microphone toward me without a word. I am 38 years old and I am not married. That is true. But let me tell you what else is true. I looked at Emeka first, my brother, who called me too proud. I paid your fees for 4 years, Emeka. 4 years. I ate gari in a room in Mushin so you could have a future. And you have never, not once, said thank you. Emeka opened his mouth, closed it. I paid Mama's hospital bills 3 times. I looked at my mother. I restructured the shop debt so this family would not lose everything after Papa died. I did not go on a single vacation in my 30s. I did not buy myself a new dress for 2 years running. I gave everything to this family. The compound was so quiet I could hear the generator humming behind the house. And while I was doing all of that, I found out that the man I loved was in my cousin's arms. I walked away. I kept quiet. I protected everyone's name, even people who did not protect me. And this, my voice cracked then just once before I caught it, and this is what I received in return. Jokes, whispers, too proud, too difficult, no man wants her. Auntie Rosaline had not said a single word since Uncle Bartholomew took the microphone. She was looking at the table in front of her. For once in her life, she had nothing to say. I do not need your pity tonight, I continued. I am not standing here for pity. I am standing here because I am done. Done being the family's secret pillar that everyone leans on and nobody acknowledges. Done being the woman you see only when you need something. And done, absolutely done, being ashamed of a life that I have lived with more dignity than most people in this compound can claim. I handed the microphone back to the MC. I walked back to my seat, and for the first time in years, maybe the first time in my adult life, I felt light. The rest of that evening passed like something in a dream. People moved differently after that. Conversations were quieter. The dancing did not fully resume. Even the jollof rice seemed less important somehow. Adeaze found me before I left. She came alone, without the rehearsed smile she usually wore. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. All the brightness she usually carried had gone out of her face, replaced by something raw and unpolished. I never stopped feeling it, she said. What I did, I never stopped. I looked at her for a long time. This woman who had been my sister. This woman who had made a choice that changed the direction of my life. I thought about all the years I had carried the wound of it, all the family gatherings I had navigated with that secret pressed against my ribs. I believe you, I said, and I meant it, not because what she did was acceptable, not because the pain had disappeared, but because forgiveness, I had learned, is a gift you don't give to the other person. It is the weight you finally put down for yourself. I left the party before the food was fully finished. First time in my life I had done that without feeling guilty. 3 weeks later, I got a phone call. His name was Dr. Femi Kuka. I had met him briefly at a medical fundraising dinner 6 months earlier. A widower, quiet and sure of himself, the way people who have survived real grief tend to be. We had spoken for maybe 20 minutes that evening. I had not thought much of it because I had trained myself over the years not to think too much about possibilities like that. He said, "I have been trying to find a way to call you for months. I heard what you said at the party." A pause. I wasn't there, but people talk. And what I heard, Nadia, I want to meet you properly. Not because I feel sorry for you, please understand that clearly, but because the woman you described, the one who carried her family and still kept her dignity, that is a woman I want to know. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long moment after he said that. Outside my window, Lagos was doing what Lagos always does, loud, chaotic, alive, completely indifferent to any single person's pain or healing. Okada riders weaving through traffic, a hawker singing out his wares, children somewhere laughing. I had spent so many years believing that love was something that would have to wait, that it was somewhere behind all the responsibilities, behind the sacrifice, behind the silence, that maybe by the time I got through all of it, love would have already gone. But here was this man on the phone, this quiet, steady man, and here was this feeling in my chest, not the desperate, clutching feeling of a woman afraid of being alone forever, something different, something that felt surprisingly like choice. "Tell me when you are free and we'll have coffee," I said. He laughed. It was a good laugh. My auntie Rosaline called me 2 days later, first time she had called me directly in over a year. Her voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. She said she was calling to apologize. She did not do it perfectly. There were still traces of the old Rosaline in there, the justifications, the "I didn't mean it like that." But she said the word sorry, and she meant some of it. And I accepted it the way you accept an imperfect thing that is still being offered honestly. Emeka came to my apartment on a Sunday with a bottle of red wine and his wife. He sat across from me at my kitchen table and he said, "I have been selfish, Nadia. I have been selfish and I didn't see it." His wife held his hand while he spoke. He was not a man who cried easily, but his eyes were wet by the time he finished. I poured the wine. We talked until midnight, really talked, the way siblings talk when they have finally stopped performing and started being honest, about Papa, about those hard years, about how grief and pressure can make people take the nearest strong thing for granted. It was not a perfect reconciliation. Families rarely are. There were years of hurt that a single conversation could not undo, but it was a beginning, a real one. Dr. Femi and I had coffee, then dinner, then long walks along the Lekki waterfront, where the evening breeze comes in off the lagoon and the city looks for just a moment like it is resting. He was not loud or flashy. He listened the way people listen when they are genuinely interested, not just waiting for their turn to speak. He had lost his wife 3 years earlier, cancer, and he carried that grief not with bitterness but with a kind of tenderness, the way people carry things that have taught them something important about what matters. We were not in a rush. Neither of us needed to be. What I know now, what I want every woman who has ever been mocked for her timing to hear is this: there is a difference between being alone and being empty. I was alone for many years, but I was never empty. I was full of purpose, full of strength, full of a love that I had been pouring into other people's lives for so long that I had forgotten to save some for myself. The woman my family pitied was the woman who held them all together when they were falling apart. the woman they mocked at parties, was the woman whose sacrifices built the very lives they were now celebrating with jollof rice and hired MCs. And the woman they said no man would want, she turned out to be exactly the kind of woman that a good man had been quietly, patiently looking for. I am Nadia George. I am 38 years old. I have known sacrifice and I have known betrayal, and I have known the particular loneliness of being surrounded by people who do not see you. But I have also known the moment the truth walks into a room and refuses to leave. I have known the feeling of finally speaking after years of silence and finding that your voice is stronger than you remembered. And I am beginning to know something new. What it feels like when someone chooses you, not out of obligation, not out of pity, but because of exactly who you are. That, I have decided, was worth every year of waiting.